In the sport of boxing, like any other sport, there's a long history full of personalities and intricate techniques. Some of the techniques of old are still used today, and some are being developed as we speak. The sport has evolved since its inception. However, I am noticing an increasing amount of disregard to older styles and techniques, claiming that they are outdated and ineffective in the modern landscape, when in my personal experience, that couldn't be further from the truth. One of the biggest examples of this, and the reason I'm making this video, is the cross guard, or the cross-arm block. The cross guard is a defensive position in which the lead hand rests along the waist to shield the body, and the rear hand rests on the opposite shoulder. When in danger, the arms are raised, creating a firm wall of bone to shield you from incoming blows. This guard isn't really seen in modern boxing, and many posts on boxing forums and pages have the mainstream opinion being that it is useless and risky and leaves openings, or that it was useful but boxing has evolved past it and traditional guards or even the Philly shell are vastly superior. So it's not worth using today, they say. But today I will prove why it's not only useful, not only effective, but arguably one of the most effective defensive guards, and I'll explain how some legends used it. This will be a two-part video. This part is about the history and breaking down how the greats used it, and part 2 will be a detailed instructional course on how to learn and successfully implement the crossguard. Starting with a brief history on the blocking style and some of its many users, the style or technique has been showcased in texts as old as 1825, where we see that it was frequently used by bare-knuckle boxers of the era. However, given how old the sport of boxing is and how long people have been punching each other in the face, I'd say the crossguard's probably been around for much longer, it just hasn't been well documented. In terms of gloved boxing, here are 5 legends who truly revolutionized the crossguard. Now, I will not include every user here. If I were to do that, the video would be 2 hours long. Now, the 5 legends I picked are Henry Armstrong, Archie Moore, Joe Frazier, George Foreman, and Dwight Muhammad Qawi. Let's go in order and look at how these legends use this system to not only take less significant damage, but also to deal incredible amounts of their own from said position. Starting with the often underrated Henry Armstrong, or as his opponents knew him, Homicide Hank. Armstrong was the definition of a pressure fighter, coming at his opponents with a deadly aggression and staying in their face round after round, even in 15-round bouts. He would stay in point-blank range the entire time, and he did it by implementing aspects of the crossguard, as well as being an insane cardio machine. Before I explain how he implemented the crossguard system, I want to clarify here that a lot of these legends use aspects of the crossguard in their own ways to have success, not one fully utilized system. My goal with this video is not only to showcase how it can be used, but also how it can be improved upon by implementing a more cohesive approach through taking techniques from these greats and merging it into one system to follow. Think along the lines of Bruce Lee, with how he took aspects of all martial arts and put it into one system or style, which he called Jeet Kune Do. That's what I'm intending to do here. With that said, back to Armstrong. Armstrong's crossguard was more about defensive bobs and weaves, as his goal was to get close to smother his opponents. He used forearm blocks on occasion as a last line of defense when his head movement was not enough. The real beauty of Armstrong's form of crossguard comes when he got to his preferred range. He used a lot of dirty boxing tactics, like using his head to lift his opponent's chin in the air, or elbow frames to create just enough space in close range to land a tight power shot. All while his opponent was trying desperately to break away. He was so good at pressure that he would even stuff his head into his opponent's bicep to prevent them from fully throwing a shot. If you've never boxed before, let me tell you, saying this is extremely difficult to pull off is an understatement. and it takes a lot of guts, because one wrong move and you are out. Armstrong's crossguard and relentless pressure show us how this style can be used offensively. As some of its detractors and critics often say, it's too passive of a guard and limits offense. However, we have Armstrong, who completely shuts down this argument by displaying a few key techniques that aren't as widely associated with the style. We've got a lot of ground to still cover, so let's move on to Archie Moore, a boxer who is often regarded as one of the biggest innovators of the crossguard, and one who used it to astounding success, having over 130 knockouts. Unlike Armstrong, Archie used a far more advanced blocking system, involving forearm blocks, elbow blocks, parries, catches, weaves, bobs, pulls, shoulder rolls, and even pivots. He was a lot more laid back than Armstrong, preferring to play in mid to long range for a time, looking for an accurate counterpunch before immediately piling on aggressive pressure after hurting his opponent. Something you'll immediately notice in his stance is how balanced he is. The sheer amount of protection the guard offered him allowed Moore to be more flat-footed without as much repercussion, which, in turn, gave him better balance and allowed him to deliver absurd amounts of power into each blow. Now, obviously don't take this as stand in front of your opponent and not move, more so that the guard allows you to stay in the danger zone longer while dropping the risk a tad and allowing you fight-ending opportunities if you are skilled enough to act on them. On the inside, Moore liked to get shoulder to shoulder with his opponent, smothering their arms with frames, switching positions with small steps and head movement, all while sneaking uppercuts and tight hooks to the head and body to deal damage. If by the off chance he did get caught, he was always in a prime position to tie up and recover, and the crossguard usually could hold up under pressure if his opponents managed to get out of the clinch. With Moore, we see a far more complete fighter and crossguard, and that's not to bash Armstrong. He just used the guard to get in close, and it was a bit single-minded, and his insane athleticism and aggressive infighting did the rest. Whereas with Moore, we get a bit of it in all ranges, and it is utilized in more ways. Moore gives us the blueprint on how to continue to evolve the crossguard by showcasing more ranges. Long to mid-range, you use jabs and counters, and you just have to have faith in your guard to keep you from danger and put you in a good position to set up those counters. In close range, it remains largely the same as Armstrong. Smother and land tight shots to wear them down, using defensive head movement to set up your power punches, and when they are hurt, you relentlessly pressure them to get them out of there. The next fighter I'm going to be talking about is the legendary Smokin' Joe Frazier, one of the most iconic boxers of all time who went life and death with the great Muhammad Ali 3 separate times, in arguably the greatest trilogy of all time, or at least the best one at heavyweight. Joe's take on the guard is almost like an amalgamation of Armstrong's and Moore's. He's like Armstrong in the sense of coming forward most of the time, but like Moore with the balance and patience, as well as the stronger emphasis on blocks. Where Joe innovates the crossguard is in the head movement, rhythm, and counter setups. Something interesting to take note of in Frazier's infighting is that he doesn't like to smother as much as the others. He prefers to be right at the bridge between mid and close range, which prevented the smothering tactics that the crossguard has been known for and was more dangerous, but in exchange gave him more solid position to fully extend his punches and get the most out of them. Often relying on his head movement, once he had the timing down, he could break the rhythm of his weaves with a bob straight downward, and when he bobbed low, he often came up with a left hook, sometimes even jumping into it to add more power and gain distance, which often led to devastating effect, even putting Ali on the deck, who was notoriously difficult to put down. On the off chance that he missed, he would crash in as a result and use head-body combinations in close range to wear them down. Joe's crossguard was utilized in a way very difficult to replicate. as timing counters and breaking rhythm are no easy feat. However, the destructive power of these tactics are unparalleled in comparison. Even with Archie Moore, his counters were often more traditional. After a miss, he'd go for it. After a weave, he'd go for it, or he would set it up off of a parry. With Joe, he read his opponent like a book. And when they thought he was going to keep the same pace, he broke it, throwing them off for a tenth of a second, often tossing out a counter at the same time his opponent was throwing. This is an intercepting counter, one of the most dangerous because whoever lands first typically has the win. Joe utilized the crossguard in ways we've seen before, but also showcased some new, craftier techniques that we can add to a more organized system. His blocks weren't as proficient as Moore's, and his pressure wasn't as consistent as Armstrong's. However, his counters and tricky rhythm made him one of the most unique users, and his left hook is stuff of legend even to this day. Next up, we got Big George Foreman, one of the hardest hitting boxers of all time, top 3 at least. One that completely dismantled Joe Frazier twice in his first career, breaking through Joe's guard by timing his bobs and broken rhythm with deadly rear uppercuts that, at one point, lifted him off the ground. But I'm not here to talk about Foreman's first career. He didn't really use the crossguard then. It wasn't until he came back out of retirement that he brought it out, and he was taught by none other than Archie Moore himself. Foreman's approach to the crossguard is not the best for everyone, but you have to consider weight class, age, and ability to KO anyone in one blow. With that in mind, Foreman's crossguard makes a bit more sense. He uses it as a panic block to weather a storm. So long as he can stay in the fight, he always had an opportunity to win it. Combine that with his insane durability and you have a very scary fighter, one who may be old, but could outlast you by pure skill and ring IQ, and when you were in deep waters, his power made all the difference. Foreman's crossguard was simple. He focused on the fundamental aspects of the blocking system. He didn't really get carried away with the head movement like Frazier or Armstrong, but that's alright, relying on his willpower and grit to persevere, and it gives us another element that we can add to our new crossguard system for part 2. With this, I think we do see a truly unique approach to the guard. Bear with me on this, but it reminds me a tad of Floyd Mayweather Jr.'s approach. Drag them to deep waters using elite defense and crafty techniques, and once they're tired, exploit it, be it by power in Foreman's case, or points in Mayweather's case. With this in mind, we can add this to a list of tactics, making a more complete, versatile system that isn't just get in close and smother. Last, but certainly not least, we've got Dwight Muhammad Qawi, a fighter that is much like Moore in how well-rounded his style was, but a lot like Frazier in how he utilized his head movement and mid-range counters. He had a steady jab and speed at long range to set up an entry or a bump in, where he could utilize his aggressive combinations and counters at a closer distance. His guard was hard to crack, but his ability to dodge punches made him even more elusive. It probably helped that he was extremely short, standing at 5'5". Being this low to the ground, we can see how a balanced style utilizing cross-armed guard can be so useful. It allowed him to deliver his full weight into each shot, and due to his height, most of his opponents were punching downward, which made it all the more easier for him to dodge and get in close, which would put him at the advantage. It should be noted that he did face George Foreman and was defeated, but utilized his techniques to truly mark up Foreman in a classic bout, a true David vs. Goliath matchup. Qawi showcased a bit of everything, and is extremely underrated. His defensive blocks and weaves, combined with his vicious counters and combinations, is one of the reasons I so desperately want to see the crossguard return in modern form. Qawi was a jack of all trades when talking about his form of crossguard. He could take care of business at long distance and then work his way inside using his head movement, but he just seemed to have a more fundamental understanding of the system than some of the other guys mentioned in this list. A lot like Archie Moore. So, if the crossguard is so great, why isn't it really seen in modern boxing anymore? Personally, I think it comes down to a few reasons. 1, misconceptions. 2, limited coaches. 3, high skill ceiling. And 4, it's perceived as outdated. Misconceptions being that it's a static guard that you just hold up the entire time, almost like a high guard, when in actuality it is a very, very active guard, and in my opinion, probably the most active guard in boxing. As for limited coaches, it's relatively self-explanatory. They just don't teach it much anymore. They would rather utilize cohesive systems that are relatively simple to learn and less awkward. Think high guard or Philly shell. As for the high skill ceiling, yes, the techniques utilized in the crossguard are incredibly advanced and take an enormous amount of dedication and repetition to properly use, especially in an actual bout, which likely does detract younger fighters as they want to be the next Floyd or Canelo, so they focus on imitating those fighters. Lastly, a common thing that I've seen is that it's outdated and would be worthless in modern boxing, as the sport has evolved too much for it to be effective. I was reading forums and posts on crossguard because I use it and have been studying it for over 2 years now, and I wanted to see what the general consensus was. And that's when I saw the trend of many people disrespecting and disregarding it simply because they didn't fully understand it. But I think after this video, it's pretty evident that it is a very effective style, and as long as you understand how to use it properly, you can have success. So, in short, the crossguard blends defensive brilliance with aggressive pressure and counterpunching. Despite being a lost art, it would still be useful in the present day. So in the next video, I will do a detailed instructional course on how to use the crossguard with not only footage of positions and basic combos, but also sparring footage of me using all of these techniques in real time, so you know I'm not bullshitting about its effectiveness. If you stayed this long, I really appreciate it, and I hope it was informative. It feels really good to get back on YouTube after such a long break, and I do promise to be more consistent, but for long videos like this, I can't promise weekly or even bi-weekly uploads just yet. With that said, don't forget to like and subscribe, and thank you for your time. Have a great rest of your day.